everyone. My name is Maddie Behrman, and I'm one of the Spark News editors.
Hi, my name is Rhea Mully, and I'm the other Spark News editor.
I want to thank you all for taking the time out of your Tuesday night to come out and educate yourselves on the upcoming school board election. We are very grateful to have all the candidates in attendance.
We are going to start the night off with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand if you choose to do so.
I pledge the allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Tonight will consist of 7 questions posed by members of the Spark editorial board. We believe this is an important event to host, not only because board members play a significant role in the district, but also because of the importance of civil engagement.
Spark has held a candidate night for every Lakota school board election since 1996. We hope you all can learn something tonight that you're able to take to the polling booths in November. We will now begin with opening statements from each candidate. Tonight will be moderated by our business manager, Kyle Smith.
Hi, my name is Kyle Smith, and I'm one of Spark's business managers. I'll be serving as the moderator for tonight's discussion. For every response given by our candidates tonight, I'll be stating a 30-second warning and a 10-second warning before calling time. We're going to get started with 1-minute opening statements and introductions with each of our candidates. But first, just a reminder to the audience, we ask that you are respectful and do not interrupt at any point during the event tonight.
Kyle, may I ask a question first?
Yep.
Sorry to start this way.
No worries.
You thought it was 2 minutes for the opening statement?
All right, we'll do 2 minutes since that's what we told you earlier. Sorry about that.
Yes, you have to talk really fast.
Yes, that's true. And time will begin when I say your name. All right, Mrs. O'Connor.
Thank you. I'm Linda O'Connor. My husband Terry and I moved here 32 years ago to raise our family in this district. And Lakota has always been a district of choice for our family. As a board member for 16 years, I had several priorities. I prioritized bringing fiscal stability to our district, badly needed when I began on the board. 16 years later, we have a financially sound district and reserves in the bank and a balanced budget. No levy on the ballot for 10 years. We've maintained a high rating. We've received the Auditor of State Award for 9 consecutive years, and we recently joined Ohio Checkbook. I prioritize rebuilding connections to our business community, to our senior citizens, to our legislators, to our parents, and our families. I prioritized helping our students to become future ready through innovative programming and as a 7-year board member at Butler Tech. I prioritized parental involvement and authority, and most importantly, I continue to prioritize our students. We've come full circle, and the district stands at a crossroads once again. For example, through the facilities plan, there are investments in our community assets that will require thoughtful and methodical leadership to plan and navigate. Students will need facilities that provide them with the ability to be future ready without overtaxing the resources of our taxpayers. Our residents and businesses deserve a board member that will consider the interest of all, and I've done that. My calling remains the
30
same.
seconds.
I love this community and I love our students. I want our students to have the same excellent experience that my sons had. We have the right teachers and the right leaders, and they have helped us to build the resources to move forward to where we need to go. Thank you to Spark for hosting tonight, putting you first, and ensuring that you leave our doors with what you need to be successful. For me, it's my priority. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Horton?
Hi, good evening. My name is Douglas Horton and I'm running for the Lakota School Board, obviously. What may not be obvious is why. For the past 12 years, as a father of Lakota students who've only gone to school in Lakota schools, I've heard you. I've heard you say time and time again how you want politics stripped out of the board and out of our schools. I've heard you say that you want someone who is an advocate for our teachers, the ones that our families love so much, like Mr. Hume, Mrs. McFarland, Mrs. Alexander, Coach Wallace, Mr. Vincent, and so many more I could name, and probably the ones that you're thinking about right now as I'm talking. I've heard you say that it's important that each and every student in Lakota feels loved and protected for exactly who they are. Doesn't matter what race, what religion, who they love, or how they present themselves. And it's important for board members to say that it's important. I've heard you say that 3.5 out of 5 stars on the district report card is unacceptable, and I've heard you when you say that your gifted students are stagnating as the district has tried to expand services, but the content doesn't have the depth or the breadth needed, and they're starting to lose their love of learning. I've heard you say that you want board members with proven business experience, like I have leading billion-dollar brands for P&G for the past 12 years. And I've heard you say that you want board members who can handle complex negotiations with a variety of stakeholders, the kind of discussions I have every day on a daily basis with the likes of the NFL, Major League Soccer, and the Olympics. I've heard you say time and again that you want board members who will deliver educational interventions, not interventions from police departments to keep board members physically separate. So on November 7th, please vote for Douglas Horton and rest assured that Horton hears you. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Schaefer?
Hello, my name is Julie Schaefer. I appreciate the Spark hosting this and continuing their great tradition. I am a proud Lakota board member as well as a Butler Tech board member. I've served Lakota for 12 years and lent my expertise in finances and business from my background to this amazing district. I am a parent of 3 amazing Lakota students, 2 of which have graduated and with the firm foundation they received at Lakota have gone on to do great things. I still have a student at Lakota, and as the only sitting board member with a current student, I think that gives me a unique perspective as to see what's actually happening in the district beyond what we intend to have happen in the district. I see the potential in every one of our students. We've done amazing work at preparing our students for the 4 E's of employment, enlistment, enrollment, or entrepreneurship for after they graduate. That's our job, to make sure that you are prepared for whatever is going to come next. I'm so proud to celebrate all of our amazing accomplishments. When I look at where we would have been in the pandemic if we hadn't implemented one-to-one technology, when I look at the Cyber Academy that we've begun and how that gives amazing opportunities for our students to graduate and have lucrative jobs upon graduation, the internship opportunities we have, and all the innovation that's been happening within our classrooms. I celebrate our staff and the wonderful work they're doing to individualize instruction and make sure that they are meeting every student where they are and growing them in all aspects of their education. I look forward to continuing to serve every single student in this district and reaffirm my commitment to making sure I will be a voice for everyone in our community and our employment and in our ranks as students. And I would appreciate your support November 7th.
Thank you. Mr. Loges?
So first, I just wanted to thank Spark. I think you guys set up a great event. So thank you. Thank you all for coming out. It's great to have so many people interested in the Lakota School Board. So my name is Russ Loges, and I'm running for the Lakota School Board because I want to return to academic excellence in Lakota and prepare our kids for their future. Lakota should be a destination of choice for families who value education. The current school board has lost its focus on what is important. Primarily, it has lost its focus on the education of our kids. Our current school board represents many years of experience, but has resulted in underwhelming performance, as evidenced by our disappointing Ohio scorecard. The results of 3.5 out of 5 stars, the U.S. News ranking 95th and 97th in Ohio. The current school board has also failed to manage our greatest assets, our facilities. It allowed many of our schools to fall into disrepair. The only answer that has been given after years of back and forth is to spend $500 million to restructure the district and build new schools. The current school board has become infamous across the region for the many missteps and infighting that has been plastered all over the news. I, for one, as a Lakota parent, I'm frustrated and I'm sick of the distractions. We must change. Lakota schools should be in the news for achieving academic excellence and celebrating student successes. We deserve better as a community. Our students deserve better. Our teachers and all Lakota employees deserve better. I look forward to being a positive change on the board and look forward to working as a team to advance our students' education and preparedness. As a Lakota school board member, I will be laser focused on education. I will practice fiscal responsibility. I will remove politics from the classroom. I will promote transparency, and most importantly, I will work to keep students safe.
Thank you. Thank you for those introductions. The candidates will now have 2 minutes to answer each question asked by our Spark student panel. We understand that this is a limited amount of time, but with the number of candidates, it will be necessary to cut you off if you start to go over. Once again, I will be providing 30-second and 10-second warnings before calling time. And once the previous candidate has clearly finished the response or reached the time limit, I will call the next candidate in line and they may begin. With each question, we will alternate the first candidate who responds to ensure fairness. Our first question will be asked by Rhea Mali, Sparks Business Manager and News Editor.
In early September of 2022, the district decided to audit its curriculum for critical race theory. With the newly selected Community Curriculum Advisory Team, what is your stance on CRT, and do you think it is being taught in Lakota schools?
All right, we're going to start with Mrs. O'Connor.
Would you say, it sounds a little bit garbled, the mic's a little bit on, if you look at it.
Okay. In early September of 2022, the district decided to audit its curriculum for critical race theory. With the newly selected Community Curriculum Advisory Team, what is your stance on CRT, and do you think it is being taught in Lakota schools?
Thank you, that's a great question. So I was the board member that pushed very hard for that curriculum team to happen. We'd received a number of concerns from the community. We had asked for evidence, and we hadn't received evidence that CRT is being taught in our classrooms. It is not in our curriculum. It would not be appropriate for a traditional K-12 school in any way for it to be taught in our classrooms. It's a collegiate level, graduate level course, and it wouldn't be appropriate for our kids. I'm really proud of the fact that for the first time ever, we have a citizen's voice in our curriculum process. I think that's really important. And I expect the CCAT team to do some great work. They're doing a multi-year review of our curriculum, K through 12. That'll probably be a 2 to 3 year review so that they get all the way through that. It's a lot to cover. They will also be developing a rubric so that when there are concerns that come forward from the community, there's a rubric and a way to measure those concerns and to address those. So I think bringing some process to those concerns as opposed to just hearing about them in board meetings, but nothing brought forward that shows us it really is in our school district, is not helpful to us. So we need to find a methodical way to deal with that. Again, I don't think CRT is being taught here in our classrooms. It's certainly not in our curriculum.
Mr. Horton.
I don't disagree with Mrs. O'Connor. As a parent, I haven't seen it in the curriculum of my kids that have gone through the district, and I have a junior at Lakota East and a son who's at Hopewell Junior. I think when this decision happened, I definitely appreciate bringing more community members in, but I remember at the time the discussion centered also the fact that the district was due for a science and math audit for their curriculum as well. And I think with the focus on understanding CRT and bringing the curriculum in, or the curriculum advisory team in, I think what's missed is the rigor that's needed for the rest of our curriculum. And I think it was a missed opportunity to do the formal audit that we would normally have undergone. And I think that's showing up directly in some of the test scores that we've seen on our district report card. So I think while there's a place for the community to be advised, I wouldn't take it away from the professionals. We have a curriculum department that specializes in this, and I think doing formal audits is a necessary process to make sure that we have the right level of education that we need in the subject areas and the right depth across all of the subject areas that we have.
Mrs. Schaefer.
I'll echo the other respondents that I do not believe we're teaching critical race theory in our schools. Again, with all the eyes that have been on our curriculum and the requests by some board members to make sure it is brought forward and to report out on any of our staff, I think it would certainly have come out at this point, not to mention the fact that most every teacher puts their curriculum and what they're teaching out on different platforms, so I as a parent can see what my kids are teaching. So the parents in the schools are aware that we are not teaching critical race theory. It's just become the national platform of a way to go after our teachers and create a witch hunt, and then we wonder why we have teacher shortages. I feel like we have to be incredibly careful that we make sure that we support our staff and make them feel valued. We did a leadership training and it said, do you perform at a higher level if you feel supported? And 98% of respondents did. It's obvious. Right now, our staff is not feeling that support. They're not feeling valued, and I think we're going to have to be very careful how we move forward in order to make sure that we reinstate that and empower our teachers to teach and not have them afraid that around every corner somebody is looking to catch them doing something inappropriate when that is not happening, and they're informing the parents who are the front line what is actually happening in our school.
Mr. Lourdes?
So CRT, from what I understand, is a collegiate level theory that I do believe is divisive. I don't see it necessarily in our schools. I wouldn't want it in our schools. But yeah, no, I don't think it's in here, and I don't think that it would be something that I would want to come here. So I would certainly be respectful of people that have concerns and address those concerns. Doing the audit, I think, will alleviate some of those concerns, so that's a great thing. But overall, these kind of issues, I feel like, are kind of the distractions I'm talking about, where it's preventing us from improving and getting the education to the students that we need to get. That's why we go back to our report card. We're not achieving in areas like reading in the third grade level. We're not achieving in future ready. It's like 43%. So those are the areas that I would like to focus on. I'd like to kind of get away from the conversations about the social issues.
Thank you all. Our second question will be asked by Maddie Bierman, Sparks News Editor.
While candidates may get monetary donations from outside groups, how can nonpartisan decisions be counted upon when conducting board business?
Could you hear that all right?
While candidates may get monetary donations from outside groups, how can nonpartisan decisions be counted upon when conducting board business?
All right, we're going to start with Mr. Horton for this question.
Yes, I think it is a concern, especially for nonpartisan positions like the school board. I know I, for one, have said that I won't accept any endorsement or donations from political parties, and I will honor that. And it's because I've heard parents over the years. Every time I've submitted a thought exchange and engaged with the district, one of the things that rises to the top is please get the politics out of this district. There's so much politics that are going into who's on the school board and all what's the discussion level is. So that's a choice that I've made, and other candidates may choose to do it different, and I respect that. And I think that's one of the ways that I can make sure that I'm staying true to doing what I want to do, which is represent all of the community, all of the voters, and all of the taxpayers and families in Lakota.
Mrs. Schaefer?
Likewise, I've made that same commitment. I think it is important. While some feel it's idealistic, I'm going to continue to be hope that we can continue to have a nonpartisan election in the school board race. I think that's very important. I had a recent fundraiser. It was supported by my host committee, was people who are Democrats, people who are Republicans, and people who are independents. And I am very thankful to have that bipartisan support, and I think that's essential in making sure we do represent all students. I've also only accepted endorsements from nonpartisan groups because I also think that's important as one of my core beliefs. So people say that schools have become too political, and we have to be the front line of making sure that doesn't happen. And I'm going to make sure that happens with not only my words, but my actions and how I move forward.
Mr. Lourdes?
So the donations that I've received, I think the furthest donation was from my Aunt Colette in Dayton. So as far as political affiliations and things like that, this is a nonpartisan board. However, I do see politics being expanded in the schools with the unions. I know they get heavily involved with mailers, digital marketing, things like that, even reaching out and supporting candidates. So to say that it's not in the race probably isn't exactly right, but I know for me, the affiliations that I do have, they don't tell me how to think or tell me what to do. I would be the one to make those decisions. And any decision I make on the school board will be based on what's best for me.
Thank you. Mrs. O'Connor?
I will agree with Mr. Lourdes that I think even if it's not a political party, our unions do have political affiliations as well. So I think endorsements have been placed from many different groups and many different PACs throughout this race. I do believe that we've had a lot of political issues that are on the national stage, that are some on the state stage as well. We've had those come into the board meetings entirely too often. We try to minimize those, and we try to make sure those don't impact the discussions that we are trying to have. It has been a distraction. However, I think the current board has done a good job of trying to contain those conversations and making sure that what people are saying is here in our local district is really here in our local district. And we aren't seeing those issues here in Lakota. I do believe it's important that our focus remain, as always, on our students. There's a bipartisan benefit to every one of us to having well-educated citizenry. And that is not a political issue. That's something we should all share a common objective. We want our youth to be as well-educated as they can possibly be. And I think we can unite behind that. I think the current board has demonstrated that. Great question, though.
All right, thank you all. Our third question will be asked by Will Hulskamp, Spark's third news editor.
This school year, the district's teacher and support staff contracts are up for negotiations. With inflation rising rapidly, how will you support the cost of living raises?
Could you ask that just one more time?
One more time.
This school year, the district's teacher and support staff contracts are up for negotiations. With inflation rising rapidly, will you support cost of living raises?
Did you guys catch that? Yep. All right, for this question, we're going to start with Mrs. Schaefer.
Again, within any negotiations, what we do is we put together proposals and the two sides send them back and forth. We can't say at this point there have not been any negotiations or conversations about what that will look like. I certainly think that we need to make sure that our staff is fairly compensated. We have to remain competitive. The quality of our teachers is the single greatest determinant and the impact of the education for our students. So if we can't attract and retain the top talent, we are not going to be able to deliver top results. So we must remain competitive and honor the fact that it's also not just about money, it's also about working conditions. Are we supporting our staff in what they're doing? Are they feeling threatened on a daily basis? Are they feeling respected as professionals? So I think we have to make sure that we recognize this is not just about dollars and cents, but it's a broader picture and making sure we all meet those needs. And I've been very impressed historically of how well Lakota has done to collaborate with their different associations to make sure overall we're meeting the best interest of our students while still supporting our staff.
All right, Mr. Loges.
So teachers are probably the most important person, obviously, in your education. My wife's a teacher, so she's important to me too, but I understand how hard you work as a teacher. The countless hours that a lot of people don't see at home, grading papers, writing references for students. So yes, I would absolutely support our teachers being paid competitively. I do understand that there's a lot of concerns and there's a finite amount of money to go around. You mentioned inflation, you've got property tax going up, a potential replacement of schools. So there's a lot of things that are fighting for that. I would like to support our teachers financially, as I do think that's a retention tool and a way to keep them here. But we do have to realize that there's other pressures out there. Just like Julie said, I do think there's other things we can do too for teachers to keep them supported, and we can look into those kind of things too. Thank you.
All right, Mrs. O'Connor.
I think it's very important that understanding the value that our teaching staff brings to the table and paying them competitively will always be a top priority for us. I agree with the other comments. It is hard when you're the last one to speak on the issue to say something original, but high quality teachers and having a spread of teachers from very young teachers and all the way up to the most experienced veteran teachers yields the best results. And so it's important that as we look at our teaching staff that we maintain that balance. It is about retention. We know that in the future, nationally, we're looking at a teacher retention issue, and we're looking at a teacher shortage issue. We have to acknowledge that. It's also important that we are recruiting appropriately at the bottom end of our pay scale. We have a good working relationship with our two unions. We have a labor management committee that meets regularly. trying to deal with issues before they become a big issue, and I think it's been a priority for the board to have a good working relationship with our staff. I do support raises that are reasonable and within the budget, that don't blow the budget out of the water. I will say that I do not support a few contracts in the recent past, not because I don't want our teachers to be fairly compensated, I do. But it was a 34% increase looking at the total compensation over 6 years, and that wasn't reasonable compared to what our taxpayers get. But I certainly value our teachers. I want them to be compensated competitively. And by the way, we will do, before we start contract negotiations, we will do a market analysis to make sure that we are competitive and that we're paying teachers appropriately. The point that everyone else has made about making sure that we're supporting our staff with the right resources for our classrooms, making sure that our work rules are reasonable and don't impose unnecessarily stringent requirements on our teachers is also important too. So it's looking at the entire picture.
Mr. Horton?
So, whenever I approach negotiations, it's interesting, people want to talk about the money first. And in my experience, negotiating 9-figure deals and sponsorships with the likes of the NFL, rarely is money the chief thing that is the object that is driving consensus between the parties. And so, while I think currently, as we look, and there will be more market assessments, teachers here are fairly compensated. But there are so many other factors. As I've talked with teachers over the past 2 years, I think it's naive to think that the teachers have been immune from the attacks from board members on their direct personage, right? We've had board members trespassing schools, trying to catch some mysterious thing in classrooms. We've had teachers singled out, and the current board under Mrs. O'Connor has seen the single biggest loss of administrative talent that I've seen in the generation that I've been in the district. So we've lost our superintendent, our treasurer, our director of curriculum, and now we just lost our K-6 director of curriculum. We've seen a lot of experienced teachers that we used to retain have now decided to retire early or leave the district. And I think one of the biggest issues is not going to be the pay. I think it's going to be stability for the district and stability for them in their careers. And they have been felt like they've been under attack for the past 2 years, and they've seen a failure in the leadership of the board to provide the stability. The board identified 3 finalists for superintendent, put them forth to the community to evaluate. The community invested their time to evaluate, make recommendations, and then at the last minute, there's an end run around for an interim superintendent going into a contract year. That belies any kind of consistency or stability that these teachers are going to be looking for, much less the protections that they feel they probably need because of the board members. So I think doing all of the pay negotiation is important, but this is going to be a lot more complicated, and you're going to need to look at this from a lot more variety of factors than this board is currently even talking about, much less looking at.
Time. All right, thank you all. Ava Heening, editor-in-chief, will ask our next question.
According to this year's report card from the state, Lakota earned a 2 out of 5 stars in the progress section and an overall score of 3.5 out of 5 stars. How will you plan to address and improve this rating for future report cards to help accomplish higher student achievement?
All right, can you say that one more time?
According to this year's report card from the state, Lakota earned a 2 out of 5 stars in the progress section and an overall score of 3.5 stars out of 5. How will you plan to address and improve this rating for future report cards to help accomplish higher student achievement?
All right, for this question, we're going to start with Mr. Loges.
So, to address the education in general, I would like to look at things like rigor, number one. And if you were at this last school board meeting, if you watched that, obviously some of them were. Dr. Lawley's talking about a lot of these things. Reading at the 3rd grade levels really low. That's at about a 73% literacy rate. So there's things like science of reading specifically that needs to be implemented. I've actually talked to Dr. Lawley about that. She's already working on that to get that instituted into the schools as a uniform process. The technology component of what we're doing, our previous superintendent, I feel like he emphasized that so much that he forgot kind of about just the core education and learning. So that's something else that I saw was going to be addressed, so I'm happy to hear that. I think that's all I have for now.
All right, Mrs. O'Connor?
So for more information on this, we had a 2-hour meeting on October 2nd, and this was the primary focus of the meeting. So boiling it down to 2 minutes will be somewhat challenging. I will say I want to be very clear about the progress score because that was the area that I was most concerned about and extremely disappointed, actually, because the progress area was an area that we have received awards in the past, and we certainly have the capability to do more with it. So the progress is not that our students did not achieve 1 year, they did. They achieved 1 year of growth. What they did not achieve was grow beyond that 1 year in their knowledge in the course of 1 year. And we can do better than that. Our students are still, for the most part, very highly achieving. We also saw growth in our subgroups with the gap closing to make sure that their achievement was continuing to rise. We talked about a number of things in the board meeting, so not only did we dive into that data very, very much in depth, and that continues, by the way, within each of our buildings, our building leadership teams, and then breaking that down with our classroom teachers as well. We're looking at heightening the rigor of our instruction, going deeper into depth in the knowledge of our instruction. We're adopting the science of reading curriculum that's been mandated by the state, but we're going to be adopting that anyway. We will also be adopting a math curriculum for K through 6. We are waiting for the governor's office to release the books that would be appropriate for the science of reading. We've got a curriculum department, but in the past it hasn't been mandated that that curriculum be used across the district. It is now going to be mandated so that our curriculum is consistent, so that our teachers get the support that they need for that curriculum. That will be ongoing professional development prior to releasing curriculum, and then making sure that we're monitoring the implementation so that our teachers are supported in how they're doing with that. We're also taking a look at our staff and resources. Are those directed to the classroom the way that they need to be?
Mr. Ward?
So I agree, this is a very complicated issue, and 2 minutes is not enough time. I think, I obviously reviewed the report card, and I watched the board meeting. I was in attendance to watch it. I saw Dr. Lawley's intervention plans, and I thought it was very interesting that after all of these interventions, none of the board members asked, what can we expect for us to get on next year's report card? At P&G, it's important to set goals and be critical and sign up and hold yourselves accountable to the growth that you're putting in place. And when I heard the interventions and reviewed it, I would estimate that probably about 60% of it had actually mostly to do with the requirement to now comply with the science of reading. And I don't think it addressed a lot of the problems. I think all of it was very curriculum based, and I think there is a place for curriculum in improving those scores. But when I talk with parents in the district parent council that I've served on with for 12 years now, we're highlighting the fact that our advanced students aren't progressing the way that we want them to because they're in math classes in 7th grade of 47 kids or 37 kids. We have Cherokee Elementary that's busting at the seam, and we're talking about, well, we're trying to get them in the thing. Obviously, we're not going to get the progression if the teachers can't even focus in on the individual needs of our students. And that's our vision as a district, right? To drive individualized learning. And then I think that's across the groups. So I'm disappointed that we haven't widened the conversation to incorporate all of the factors that are affecting this, which is, yes, teachers, support, curriculum, but also how do we address class size and the number of bells, and how do we make sure that we have enough opportunity for the kids to see the progression regardless of where they are at achievement today? That's the question that I would like the board to be asked.
All right, Mrs. Schaefer?
I definitely think we have to look at the report card, and we are, as has been stated, doing a lot of that work to try to shore up those numbers. But I also think we have to be careful to use that as our only metric in our success. After the last debate, I asked my daughter, who's a recent grad, what she thought, and her quote to me is, "The test that we're grading our kids' success on hasn't caught up to the future we're preparing our kids for." And I had to write it down when she said that to me. I'm like, wait, repeat that again, because that's absolutely true. It is what we have as the metric, so we have to pay attention because people won't come here if we don't. But we have to realize that that's going to require an investment to make some of those changes. We've been operating on a shoestring budget for years. We're spending, since the year before I was elected to the board to now, if you look at our increase in our spending per student, it's gone up 27%. And if you look at our overall spending, it's only gone up 14%. And during that time, the cost of living has gone up 41%. So even people on a fixed income with Social Security are getting that cost of living. So in essence, we're spending less on students, and then we're wondering why we're not doing as well. If you look at those top 4 districts, or 4 local districts that were lauded as part of the top 10 in the state, they spend on average 39% more per student than we do. That has an impact. If you look at that from a class size perspective, that could take our classes from 25 on average to 15. Imagine the success our teachers could have if they had 15. I'm not suggesting we do that. I don't think that's possible. We know we don't have the room, but we have to recognize that we are not investing our money where we need to, and we're holding it as reserves, and we've seen the impact of that in our report card.
All right, thank you. Our fifth question will be asked by Carl Funds, our other editor-in-chief.
The ongoing master facilities plan, District Operations Officer Chris Bessarge recently suggested an adjusted plan to add additions to both existing high school buildings instead of the original plan of building 2 new high schools. Do you feel the current master facilities plan will support the needs of the district?
And could you repeat that one more time?
With the ongoing master facilities plan, District Operations Officer Chris Bessarge recently suggested an adjusted plan to add additions to both existing high school buildings instead of the original plan of building 2 new high schools. Do you feel the current master facilities plan will support the needs of the district?
All right, did you guys catch that
Just
one?
the last couple of words.
With the ongoing master facilities plan, District Operations Officer Chris Bessarge recently suggested an adjusted plan to add additions to both existing high school buildings instead of the original plan of building 2 new high schools. Do you feel the current master facilities plan will support the needs of the district?
Thank you, Colin.
I think I got it.
And we're going to start with you, Mrs. O'Connor.
I actually think, and we've come to a good place in my mind with the facilities plan. Our next step in it is to look at funding options. We started with option 4, which was where our community landed, and the board agreed to that in terms of grade configurations. We were reducing the number of transitions for students. We were going to reduce the number of campuses, which would result in operational savings. And so as we started exploring what that looked like to put 4 into place, we looked at, it originally had 2 new high schools. When we looked at the campuses, we were going to be losing some of the spaces that we have that provide opportunities for kids. Some of our tennis courts, our baseball fields, some of those things we couldn't do on those properties. And so that was when we started looking at what if we keep the original high schools, add additions to those. That will be a tremendous savings for us in terms of reducing from 4 campuses with our 2 freshman buildings coming over to now 2 campuses. So there's terrific savings to happen there without losing opportunities for students, which was really important to us. I am in agreement with where we have landed, and we have work to do now to move forward with that to see what it looks like in terms of different ways to fund those plans, including taking advantage of state funding that's currently available to us, looking at doing this in a phased-in approach instead of one ballot issue, especially as we're not sure what the impact of ed choice is going to have on our school district and our demographics. We don't know if it'll change it or not. So phasing it in gives us an opportunity to look at that impact as we go, to come back to the community and say, are you comfortable with what we're doing? Here are what our demographics are looking like. We're staying current with those. And it gives us the opportunity, I think, to do what we need to do.
All right, Mr. Ward.
I think that's a good summary of the master facilities plan as it's been done to date. And I think it's really boring. It is a Lego building exercise of buildings and operational savings. And so while all the work may be sound and it may be what's needed for the district, I don't see a compelling vision that taxpayers would vote for. And I think when you're coming to what we're talking about, which is what are our facilities going to look like for the next 20 years, the next generation of students in Lakota, I think it's a rare opportunity for us to look at what kind of educational services do we want to deliver and how do we want to present them to our families. So it's interesting that we kind of defaulted. I observe a lot of groupthink from the people who've been doing this work, as opposed to defaulting that we need 2 very large high schools. What would Lakota look like if we had a variety of sizes of high schools that parents could choose for? And we've done the planning to begin with to know what that demand would look like, so we can open enroll across the district, not limit that, and parents have the choice to choose, you know what, my child would do great in this building like Lakota East that has 2,500 students. That's great. But my neighbor, they would choose a school that's smaller and more individualized for their needs. And we have examples of this all across the country. So in Cincinnati, they've incorporated Montessori schools into their elementary buildings. What would that look like if we did that same approach here in Lakota? What if we had magnet schools for the arts and sciences that might be different in sizes? You wouldn't need a tennis court at all of the schools. And I think that one-size approach that we defaulted into has led to a lot of the frustrations that I hear from parents and taxpayers. And I think there's a real opportunity here to talk about the future of education in conjunction with the plan, which would create a vision that I think would actually get support from the community because they'd see the return on the investment. It's not asking, hey, things are falling apart and we're going to try to shake you down for money. It's, no, here's what we're going to create for the future generations. And I'm optimistic that that has a lot better chance with voters because we've seen that with the last time we made that deal with them.
All right, Mrs. Schaefer.
Even though we have a master's facilities plan that has been currently approved that we're looking at, there is still much work to be done, and we all recognize that. We've worked with an educational visionary and will continue to work with that. So just because we have one large building doesn't mean we can't create a microcosm in that to serve different needs, whether that be fine arts, whether that be something else. We've seen that when we've done Central Academy right now. So there's a great opportunity for us to individualize within that larger structure. It gives us maximum flexibility if that perhaps doesn't work and we don't have a building then that's not being utilized. Another important component is right now we have the opportunity for the state to fund 29% of our expenses. Again, this would be a multi-phase project. And so if we lock that in, we're getting back 29 cents of every dollar our taxpayers have. We're also at a point right now where we're about to have several bonds roll off. So while the price tag looks expensive, first of all, we're not committed to doing the entire plan. We will do it in phases, so it's not a guaranteed expense of that whole amount. We're able to get part of that money back, and we can lock in that money from the state and have those bonds roll off, so it would have very little impact on our local taxpayers. It's looking like that millage would likely be a mill or so in order to fund that entire plan, given the roll-off of the other millage that's coming off. I think we have a tremendous opportunity. We must move forward on this. We don't have room right now to address our class size needs, and if we want to address our learning, that is something fundamental that we're going to have to take care of. So time is of the essence, and we must make this a priority this next year.
All right, Mr. Loges.
So as I said earlier, there's finite amount of funds available. We have inflation, we have the teachers' contracts coming up, we have our property tax going up. To add this on is probably going to be too much for the community, I would think. I don't know that they're going to vote for that. I think the creative solutions and things we're doing now and things that we have to do is maintain our facilities. We have money available to do that. We all know some of the schools that are deteriorating, like Lakota West freshmen. I think we should use that money to invest in those schools and try to bring them up to date. We could use, I know we're already using modular buildings to increase their capacities. So no, I would not, as it is, support a plan that is going to run $500 to $600 million 6 to 10 years from now when it's completed, even if it is on sale. I don't think that's a good reason to purchase it. So for now, I would not support.
All right, thank you. Rhea Molly will now ask her sixth question.
In 2019, the Ohio Department of Education released its strategic plan, which identified social-emotional learning as one of the 4 equal learning domains. Since then, Lakota has implemented SEL through Mind Peace Counseling, E+R=O lectures, schoolings, and more. Do you support social-emotional learning, and how do you plan to ensure every student receives equal services as the district expands in student enrollment?
And one more time.
In 2019, the Ohio Department of Education released its strategic plan, which identified social-emotional learning as one of the 4 equal learning domains. Since then, Lakota has implemented SEL through mindfulness counseling, E+R=O lectures, schoolings, and more. Do you support social-emotional learning, and how do you plan to ensure every student receives equal services as the district expands in student enrollment?
All right, we're going to start with Mr. Horton.
Yes, so I will make sure not to use the acronym because acronyms are apparently a bad thing and it feels spooky and irritating. Social emotional learning, it's a state standard and there's a reason for it. I've seen it as a parent. I've incorporated lessons that my kids have brought home to me. I remember Mrs. Bug teaching them about bucket fillers and bucket takers. And there's a number of people I work with at P&G that are bucket takers. And I need to stay away from them and surround myself with bucket fillers. These are important lessons for life and how you manage relationships. And when you look at the standards and it's stuff like being able to manage your emotional response to things, being able to collaborate with others, not only is it the thing that I think we want from our students to have as members of society, but it obviously will impact their ability to learn. If you're able to regulate your emotions and make sure that you're coming to class in a state prepared to learn, that's going to make you better able to receive the educational services that are being delivered. And so, again, I don't call it an acronym because that's bad, and I work for P&G that's filled with acronyms, and those are bad acronyms because they're too hard to keep track of. But social emotional learning is not something that I fear, and I'm saying that as a parent who's watched my 2 students go through it and incorporated what they've learned into me. And at other times we've heard people talk about these lessons and they don't understand them. And take the time. At another debate, there was a conversation around a lesson on how things respond to boiling water, right? And there was consternation around, why are they learning about coffee beans? Well, because you can choose how you react to stress, which is the boiling water. And you can turn soft, or you can, like carrots, or you can become hard like a hard-boiled egg, or you can choose to be a coffee bean and make things better. That's the lesson of social emotional learning. So I encourage people to look more into this because I found it rewarding.
All right, Mrs. Schaefer.
Yes, I absolutely support social emotional learning. I think it's essential. If you look at the definition according to the Committee for Children, the definition is the process of developing self-awareness, self-control, and interpersonal skills that are vital for school, work, and life success. Who does not want that for their children? I learned that in the 70s in the school. I'm thankful that my children have learned that here, and I hope future generations learn that. These are the social emotional learning standards from the state of Ohio. This isn't an option. This is something that the state has mandated. If we're worried about testing, if it's 1/4 of their platform and we don't teach it, don't you think that might be a problem going forward? Absolutely. Forbes and the Harvard Business Review recently did a survey of what are employers looking for in their hiring decisions. And pretty much what they were saying was what kids will learn in social emotional learning. They're looking for communication skills, teamwork, adaptability, problem solving, leadership, creativity, integrity, sincerity, kindness, patience, persistence, emotional intelligence. That's what this is. That's what our employers are clamoring for. And we are doing a disservice to our children if we don't give them that. Some people say they should learn that at home, and yes, in a perfect world, every child would come from the perfect home and have all of those needs met. But you know what? That doesn't happen. We have kids who are coming with tremendous needs. I was at a fanfare this week, it was 6:50 in the morning, somebody said, gosh, you got here early to one of the students, and she said, because it beats being at home. And that's the reality for our kids. So we have to make sure we meet them all where they are and provide.
All right, Mr. Loges.
So social emotional learning, we've learned is here. Unfortunately, I think it's a bit of a distraction, and I'm not sure the data supports that it's really doing any good. What I have seen is our scorecards go down as we continue to support all these social issues. I'm not saying kids don't deserve support, but I just haven't seen the data that says that it's going to improve their education. The number one priority of the school system should be to educate their kids. I do also believe that the parents should be the primary in the children's development of their emotional learning. So I would rather spend our time, rather than having 18 classes set aside for social emotional learning and learning about the coffee beans, I'd rather them focused on doing their homework, their math, learning how to read. That I would prefer that our time be spent with.
All right, Mrs. O'Connor.
I have to confess, I didn't expect the coffee bean to be surprised me with that. I'm going to start at the opposite end of your question about mental health services and expanding counseling. We've seen since the pandemic that much higher incidence with our students in terms of anxiety and depression and other mental health issues impacting them. And I do believe that's a part of what we have to provide for our students. And if we don't, we aren't helping them to get over barriers that may be impacting their learning. So, we just had a House Bill 123 passed, which talked about this and actually about expanding these services. Right now, we use a couple of different community organizations. I think we'll continue to look for other organizations. We use Hope Squad and Sources of Strength, which was talked about in the legislation, and we'll be expanding that into our high schools. In terms of SEL, and I've said this in, I'm not even sure how many board meetings now, but I've talked about it. SEL in and of itself, quite apart from it being a political issue at the national level, is about the old-fashioned term character education. It's about self-regulation, handling anger issues, being able to work collaboratively in groups. Basically, it boils down to respect for others. And I don't think that's ever a bad thing. You have to have that skill not just in a classroom so that you're not impacting other students who are learning alongside you, but you need to have that skill when you walk out the door in order to be able to work in any job situation, in the military, starting your own business. You have to have those people skills. We are not required to teach it as a class. We actually use it just integrated into our regular classroom activities. If it's the 10 minutes in the morning when the classroom teacher is saying, okay, let's focus on respect for today and your kindness for today, or any one of those things, that's appropriate activity in a classroom in my mind.
Time. All right, thank you. And Maddie Beaver will ask our seventh and final question.
What is the most pressing issue facing the district right now, and how do you plan to address it?
And one more time.
What is the most pressing issue facing the district right now, and how do you plan to address it?
All right, we're going to start with Mrs. Schaefer.
We have a few at the moment. I think we've addressed a lot of them. I think the most pressing issue right now is to make sure that we don't overcorrect for challenges that the district is facing. So whatever that challenge might be, whether it's report card, whether it's the barriers to learning, we have to make sure that we find the right balance so that we're meeting every single student. So the way I would address every bit of our learning is to make sure that we are meeting students where they are, providing the resources that they need, whatever that might be, whether that's breakfast in the morning so that they have the energy to learn, whether that's more challenging, rigorous classes, whether that's our students with special needs or our twice exceptional students who might need different supports. I think our most immediate challenge is make sure we find every diverse student need and meet those kids where they are and grow them. That's going to help us with the report card. That's going to help us make every student have those gap closings, make the progress that they need, and that's what we need to focus on in making sure that we don't ever overcorrect.
Mr. Logis?
So I think I've probably said this a few times, but the reason I'm here is I was concerned about the education that our students are getting. It was proven to be a concern after some of the results we've seen. So the number one concern I have is education. That goes to a lot of things. Teachers' class sizes, I think that's a big. I've heard schools recently stop sending homework home because it's too stressful for kids. And that's part of social emotional learning. You learn that innately in school when you learn to cope and learn to deal with stressors of homework. Let's focus on education. So we're talking about a lot of things here that are distractions. SEL, a lot of these social issues that should not be the focus of education. Education is going to be a lifeline to a lot of these kids. So if we focus on education, they'll be able to change their lives That's what I hope. I also obviously got involved because I have concern about our board. It seems like it stopped working as a team and working together on a mission to improve the district. So those are my concerns, and I think those interfere with the students.
Mrs. O'Connor?
As Mrs. Schaefer said, there is not one particular issue. There are a multitude of issues, and it's been that way, by the way, since I came on the board. It's never just one issue that you're dealing with. And that's part of the role of a board member, to understand you've got a master facilities plan, you've got student achievement, you've got distractions, you have barriers to learning that you need to be considering, and how are all of our students being impacted. So it isn't just one issue, but that's the role of a board member, being able to look at all of those issues and addressing them all at the same time. Our single biggest priority in my mind, as always, is our core competency, student achievement. What are we doing? And not just achievement, but student learning. What are we doing to support our classrooms and our teachers to be sure that we are getting the best possible student learning in every respect and across all grade levels? So I think that's where our focus needs to be. I think the district has plans in place to address some of those issues. We've got plans in place dealing with the facilities issues, and all while doing that and maintaining a financially stable situation for our district. Those would be the challenges that I would say are facing the district.
Mr. Ward?
So I've talked a lot about the issues that I would prioritize as a board member, but when I talk with anybody in the community, the thing I hear loud and clear, that the most pressing issue for the district is that we're making headlines for the wrong reason. And it comes down to Darby Bodie being on the board. And I think that we need to take a firm look at how do we address that situation. I've watched a board for 2 years be consumed by her distractions and not take the steps to isolate what she's doing. So when she was asked to resign by the board and she said no, I made the call to the board to say, both in the district parent council meeting and publicly, to say, why don't you strip her from the committees so that she can't dominate the conversation in committees? And the answer was, well, there's rules on how many people have to be on a committee. Fast forward to this year, and when Mr. Adi decided he didn't want to be part of the finance committee anymore, the same board members changed the rules. In 2 years, the board hasn't made significant action as a board outside of limiting conversation at board meetings and other minor things like that. They formed a lot of committees, but they haven't taken action because of the distraction that is Darby Bodie. And I do not support Darby Bodie. I think we've heard answers tonight that sound very reminiscent of Darby Bodie from some of the candidates, and I watched all your eyes roll when those answers were given, so I can tell I'm not alone on this. I'm also, I think, the only person on the stage who signed the legal complaint to have her removed from office. And I think that's an important step that we need to engage the community in, as they're saying that they don't want that representation. The one thing that I hear from anybody, whether they have students in the district or not, is they want us to stop making headlines. They want the school board to be boring again. And we can talk about all the actions that we're taking, but until you address that issue and how that has hurt our district and our integrity, it's not going to satisfy the voters of this district.
All right, thank you candidates for those responses, and thank you to our Stark School Board for asking those questions. Now we're going to move on to our closing statements, which will be 1 minute in length each. And we're going to begin with Mr. Loges.
Kyle, could you ask Mr. Loges, Mrs. Schaefer, Mrs. O'Connor to move their microphones closer?
Better.
All right, we all set?
Yep.
Okay, Mr. Loges, take it away.
So I am invested in this community as a volunteer, as a parent, as a taxpayer. I'm a passionate supporter of my kids and all kids' success. I will relentlessly work to improve our schools and make them great as our community deserves. I believe we can do this without spending money. We need to be laser focused on education and eliminate distractions from the classroom. My years in nursing leadership and a small business ownership have prepared me to work with a team to accomplish our mission. I'm running to be a positive change on our school board that will return the focus to the purpose of educating our students. Please vote for me on November 7th, and thanks again to the Spark team for hosting this event.
All right, thank you. Mrs. O'Connor.
There were many comments made tonight that are based on faulty thinking, frankly, but I'm not going to address those or end on a negative note. Happy to talk to anyone afterwards that has questions about some of the comments that were made, though. I want to thank you all for being here tonight. To all of you, once again, when I sit through these forums, I think we're doing a really good job with our students. And thank you for that. I'll continue to work tirelessly to protect the financial stability of our district while helping our students to be successful for whatever pathway they choose in the future. If the community again allows me the opportunity to serve, I'll continue to provide calm, measured, common sense, proven leadership as we move into the future. Experienced leadership is needed now more than ever. Please vote O'Connor November 7th. Thank you for the opportunity to serve.
Mr. Horton?
So tonight you've heard a lot. You've heard a lot of examples of limited thinking and claims of finite resources and reasons why things need to be a certain way. You've also heard from myself that I think there's a different approach that we can take to running the district. I think there's a way to bring innovative thinking and collaboration, bringing principles like integrative thinking to bear to help shape how we're going to deliver education, not just in the short term to make up the shortfalls that we've identified, but to build a better school district well suited for the next generation of students to come. So on November 7th, please help us by getting out. Many of the friends and neighbors that you have not heard what you've heard here tonight. So share what you've heard here tonight with them and let them know that when you vote for Douglas Horton, Horton hears a you and hears them. Thank you.
All right, Mrs. Schaefer?
When my husband and I moved here 19 years ago and we saw our first grader go from a class of 18 for kindergarten to 27 here in Lakota, I chose to get involved to be part of the solution. I've continued to work diligently since that time to make a difference for every single student, every staff member, and every community member. I have been part of the solution, and I hope that you've seen that with my actions and my words. We are at a crossroads in Lakota.
30.
We had 17% voter turnout at the last election, and it is going to take everyone getting involved and making sure they get out and vote November 7th to make the changes and the difference that we need. Please vote on November 7th, and I would appreciate your support. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for those responses, and thank you, audience. Now for a few final words from Matt and Maria.
That is the end of our event. On your programs, there's a QR code to a quick survey. If you could take the time to share your thoughts and opinions on the candidates, it would be greatly appreciated. Also, if you're interested in placing advertisement in our publication or purchasing a subscription, there's a table outside of the auditorium with Spark representatives